begin tonight in Christchurch with a man who said he went to EQC, then the government, with documentary evidence his scope was woefully inadequate and that serious damage had been missed. So concerned was he about what was going on, he wrote to the chairman of EQC, CCing Jerry Brownlee and Ian Simpson, warning them to start learning from their mistakes and to stop repeating them. That was 2 years ago. Now, 6 weeks ago today, we featured a long interview with the CEO of EQC in which Sid Miller said sorry to claimants we'd spoken to still in dispute with the Earthquake Commission over their earthquake damage. The previous week, we'd interviewed a lawyer representing 200 claimants who said he believes there's thousands of homeowners in Christchurch who don't yet know the full extent of their earthquake damage. And later in the program, we will hear from somebody who had no idea that the home they were buying was a disaster. A fortnight ago, we revealed the cost of re-repairs so far, and during our coverage, a constant response has been that the people in charge didn't know how serious the missed damage problem was. Tonight, a man who says he tried repeatedly to tell them. It began when David Townshend received a substantial change in assessments of the damage to his property.
EQC initially assessed this house as severely structurally damaged, with the requirement to repile and redo the foundations completely. That's after the first earthquake, September the 4th, 2010. And then they turned around after the February quake and re-inspected, and all that structural damage was removed from the scope.
David Townshend was confused. How could the damage become less? A dispute process was entered into. A contractor came to assess the cost of repairs and it was still low. But David Townshend cash settled and got the contractor back to do the work. And it was then the contractor said he couldn't do the work for the sum mentioned.
And quite quickly, he ended up admitting to me that the view that it ended up giving EQC in writing in a quote was not what he had originally found himself, and he felt he was under some pressure to provide a quote that didn't reflect his own view of what the earthquake damage was.
David Townshend now had this in writing from the contractor, and he compared it with his EQC scope of damage, and the difference was striking.
What it clearly shows is the EQC asked or instructed a foundation contractor to provide a quote for what they thought was the damage, not what he believed was the damage. And he raised the issue and said, well, I don't think that you're describing the damage properly, and they just told him to stick to the quote, to stick to their scope.
I've got his letter, which you've provided to us, and it says, and I quote,
Yep.
I was instructed to give a quote for the scoped repairs.
Yes.
And yet he had seen damage, earthquake damage, that had not been scoped, but he was not allowed to quote on that. So, am I extrapolating too far to say that there was an awareness of earthquake damage, but because it had not been noticed in that assessment, the scope, it was not going to be dealt with?
Well, that's simply the case. They didn't deal with it in my settlement. They settled me for less. They settled me for his quote that they knew wasn't correct and that he knew wasn't correct.
So the scope said one thing, and the man who came to do the work on the scope said the damage was much greater, and you got that in writing, and you eventually got the official paperwork in writing, and you were able to compare and contrast. And you were so concerned about the disparity between what the scope was saying and what the actual damage was that you took this to the people at the very top. Who did you go to?
So, for people that don't understand, there's a lot of hidden information that we don't know as homeowners when we get faced with what they're telling us on site or what they're able to present us. They wouldn't give me a scope to show me what their current view was. They wouldn't provide me with the foundation contractor's quote that I knew existed. So I had to go, firstly, and ask EQC under the Official Information Act for all that information on my claim. Once I got that, it became obvious from that document I've supplied to you that they were misleading me, that they, purposely were overriding what a contractor said was required. So I did write to Ian Simpson himself and emailed. I filed official complaints with EQC. I even took it to Minister Brownlee's office because the house is only about 500 metres away from his electorate office in Ilam or in Brindwa. And I wrote a letter to the chairman of the board of EQC and copied Ian Simpson and Jerry Brownlee in on this particular issue, and generally for the systemic issues that I uncovered for this whole claim.
Jerry Brownlee was your local constituency MP, so you took this to his office and you CC'd him into the correspondence to EQC and so on. Now, we have absolutely no idea whether or not he received that, and he must have been receiving an enormous amount of correspondence. But did you hear back from him at any stage during this process?
No. I heard from his office that they were trying to encourage EQC to manage the complaint, but it took 18 months to sort out the complaint, which to my mind was fairly blatantly obvious from the document you've seen and others. They were doing the wrong thing. But it took them 18 months to sort out the complaint, and possibly that was aided by pressure from Jerry Brownlee's electorate office. But I had no response from him directly.
When were you doing all of this, David? When did you go to Jerry Brownlee's office? When were you getting your papers under the OIA? What period was this?
So the foundation contract to come, I think it was late 2014. I discovered the information under OIA mid-2015, I would say, and raised a complaint maybe early 2015 with EQC. It dragged on for a number of months, maybe up to a year before I started waving the flag at Jerry Brownlee's level by letters and emails. So we're talking early 2016. I think early 2016 I wrote a letter to the chairman of the board of EQC to try and highlight the systemic issues and say, look, you've got staff clearly who are doing things that are wrong. How many times have these staff been used on other claims? They're surely not just doing it on this particular claim alone. So you've got systemic issues here. I can give you names. I can let you investigate. Please get to the bottom of it. They didn't seem interested in investigating the systemic issues.
So that was 2 years ago. And by then, of course, we have the MB report, we have the Audit Office report. There's been quite a bit of whistleblowing already about what was going wrong. But now we are being told that people are surprised by the extent of the damage that is only just being discovered. Are you surprised by this?
I find it astounding that the issues that have been raised and publicly in the press, you know, by yourself over the years, by other media organisations, the failed repairs have been around as an issue publicly for a very long time. And look, I'm not the only one, and by far the only one, that's raised the issues at this level. I'm a little bit gobsmacked it's taken this long to come to the surface, but I mean, absolutely, yeah, it needs to, and it needs to be properly addressed.
David Townshend, now we have also managed to talk to the contractor. In this case, he confirms he's written that letter, he had written that letter, and he told us scopes were often different from the actual damage. He also told us he too attempted to warn people what was going on. We're working to establish some details around what he told us, and we'll bring his story to you at a later stage. Checkpoint approached former EQC Minister Jerry Brownlee, of course local MP for David Townshend this afternoon. A spokesperson told us his office have found the contact they have had with Mr Townshend and say they provided all the support a constituency MP is able to offer. Later in the program, we'll talk to somebody who bought a home with earthquake damage they did not know about.